The night my world ended, the ceiling fan kept turning slow, careless like time itself. Didn't care that I could barely breathe. Chemo ate at my bones, the triplets wailed in hungry chorus, and the man who swore to hold my hand through every storm left a note colder than winter. Don't look for me. The city believed I slipped quietly into the dark. He wore a black suit, a practiced grief, and built a new life on my so-called grave. But grief can be a seed. In the hush of a country dawn, I learned to stand again, first for my babies, then for the woman in the mirror who refused to stay buried. Years later, the lights will find us both, the liar crowned as a saint and the wife he wrote off as a ghost. When truth walks into a crowded room, even the chandeliers hold their breath. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories like this speak to you, tap, subscribe, and join our circle. Your support keeps these voices alive. Amara Okoye sat on the edge of the thin hospital mattress, her body trembling though the room felt too warm. The doctor's words still echoed in her skull like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. Stage 2, cervical cancer. She stared at her trembling hands, one resting protectively near her belly, as if her babies, her fragile 4-month-old triplets, could somehow absorb her strength through the touch. The stroller in the corner carried soft whimpers and little kicks. Their tiny lives depended on her, and yet she felt the floor had just cracked beneath her feet. The door swung open with the sharp scent of expensive cologne. Darius Cato, her husband, entered in his crisp navy suit, gold watch flashing beneath the fluorescent lights. His face wore a performance of concern, but his eyes betrayed something colder, distant. "What did they say?" he asked almost impatiently. I have cancer," she whispered, forcing the words out. For a split second, his expression faltered, but not with shock or sorrow. It was annoyance, like a businessman hearing of a meeting canceled at the last minute. "Stage 2, she added quickly, desperate to ease the weight between them. "It's treatable. We caught it early. I'll need treatment and your help with the babies." Darius exhaled loudly and stepped back. "Amara, this is a lot." Her heart broke at his tone. Once this man had held her hand under the stars and vowed never to let go, swearing that no storm could shake their union. She wanted to believe that man still existed. "I can fight this," she said, her voice cracking. "But I need you with me. For them, for us." He gave a rehearsed nod. "Of course we'll fight this together." But Amara caught at the quick flicker in his eyes, the calculation rather than compassion. It chilled her deeper than the diagnosis. That night, while she sat awake rocking one of the babies, she reached for the other side of the bed only to find it cold. Darius had claimed to be at a late meeting. Her heart whispered lies to soothe her. He stressed he'll come around, but her gut twisted differently. Days bled into weeks. Chemotherapy stole strands of her thick hair, her skin paled, and sometimes she could barely stand long enough to warm a bottle. Meanwhile, Darius slipped further away, early departures, late returns, and always that glowing phone screen that stole his attention. One morning, exhausted and feverish, Amara begged Darius, "I need you. I'm drowning here." She struggled to hold a bottle steady for one child, while the others wailed. He rolled his eyes. "You think I'm not dealing with things? I'm out there working, keeping this house standing while you just lie in bed all day." The words sliced her heart. She whispered, "I'm sick. You know that. You're always sick now." His voice was low but venomous. He walked away, leaving her trembling in silence. On Sunday, he insisted they attend church. He clasped her fragile hand through the service, his mask of a devoted husband shining. When the pastor called for prayers for the sick, Darius stood tall, declaring before the congregation, "Give strength to my brave wife battling cancer." Applause, rippled people whispered admiration, and one woman hugged Amara tightly, saying, "You're so blessed to have a man like him." Amara smiled weakly, but inside something cracked. She had seen a message the night before on his phone. "I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again, S." Her heart had burned with denial, telling herself it could be work-related. But the next night, the thread was gone, deleted. Selena Hart. The name gnawed at her. Later that week, he strolled in with a new silk shirt, clearly out of their budget. "That's new," she said, balancing a baby on her hip. "Meeting," he muttered, brushing past her. His tone treated her like a stranger, not his wife. That night, as Zuri Mbele, her best friend and a nurse, came over to help with the babies, Amara's mask broke. She collapsed into tears. "I think he's cheating," she confessed. "He's angry, distant. He looks at me like I'm disgusting." Zuri clasped her hand firmly. "You're not crazy, Amara. Paranoia doesn't delete messages. But I'm sick. What if it's just my fear talking? Fear doesn't buy silk shirts when you can't pay hospital bills. If he's leaving you now while you're fighting for your life, then he was never the man you believed he was. 2 nights later, Amara rose in the dark for water. As she passed the living room, she froze at the sound of Darius's voice. He spoke sharply into his phone, unaware she was there. "No, I'm not dragging this out. She's as good as dead already. I can't waste my life on her and those brats. This is my only chance. I'm done." Her breath caught. The world spun. Each word was a blade carving away the last fragments of hope. As good as dead. Those brats. She staggered upstairs, each step heavy as lead. She collapsed onto the bed, pressing her face into a pillow to muffle the sobs that threatened to wake her children. The next morning, the closet was half empty. His car was gone. On the counter lay a single note. "Don't try to find me." That was it. No goodbye kiss, no apology, just the final betrayal. Amara's knees buckled. The triplets cried behind her, their tiny voices pleading for comfort. Her vision blurred, chest tightening, and the world went dark. When Zuri woke to the baby's wails, she rushed upstairs. Her scream split the air when she found Amara lying cold and pale on the hallway floor, barely breathing. She dropped to her knees, shaking her friend's shoulders. "Amara, stay with me." Her trembling fingers found a weak pulse. In panic, she called emergency services, her voice breaking as she begged them to hurry. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically. They said it was exhaustion, dehydration, and stress, compounded by the cancer. She was lucky to survive. Zuri stayed feeding the babies in the waiting room, refusing to leave Amara's side. When Amara finally opened her eyes, her throat dry, she whispered hoarsely, "Where are they?" "They're safe," Zuri soothed. "And so are you." Tears pricked Amara's eyes. "He's gone." Zuri nodded. "I know." For days, Amara said little. She fed her babies with trembling hands, staring at the hospital ceiling. The silence felt like a coffin. She realized Darius hadn't even checked if she survived. He'd taken everything and vanished, as if she and their children were just shadows he could erase. One afternoon, Zuri placed a folder on her lap. "You need to see this." Amara opened it with trembling fingers. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, all her savings gone. Even the small inheritance her late mother had left her. Her breath hitched. "What?" "He drained everything 2 weeks before he left. And there's more." Zuri's jaw tightened. "He even tried to file a life insurance claim in your name, pretending you were dead. They denied it, but he tried." Amara's vision blurred with tears. "He wanted me gone. For real." Zuri pulled her close. "He wanted freedom and money. That's all. But you still have something more powerful. Your life, your children, and me. We'll find a way." Amara pressed her lips against her baby's soft heads, whispering, "I'm not done. He may think I'm buried, but I'm still breathing. One day he'll see." The vow burned through her chest like fire, stronger than the cancer eating at her body. It was the beginning of a new story, one she would write not with despair but with survival. The days in the hospital blurred into one another, beeping machines, whispered prayers, and the smell of antiseptic. Amara held on to life with threads of determination, not for herself alone, but for the 3 little hearts that depended on her. Zuri steadfast as the rising sun never left her side. When Amara's strength faltered, Zuri lifted the babies into her arms, soothed their cries, and reminded Amara in quiet words, "You're not alone. He may have abandoned you, but I won't." Yet beyond the safety of the hospital walls, Darius had already begun rewriting history. News traveled quickly in Namkawa City. A private funeral was whispered into being, orchestrated by Darius himself. He arrived, dressed in sleek black eyes, downcast crocodile tears glistening on his cheeks. He clutched one of the triplets in his arms just long enough to draw sympathy and told mourners, "She fought bravely, but heaven wanted her back." His voice cracked in rehearsed grief, and people wept for him, the widowed father of 3. Amara had no idea. Zuri returned to the ward one afternoon, her face pale and lips pressed thin. She carried a folded newspaper. "You need to see this," she murmured. Amara unfolded it slowly, her eyes catching on the headline, "Community mourns young mother. Husband prays for strength." Her chest tightened. Beneath the headline was a picture of Darius' head bowed in front of a casket. Her hands shook. "He buried me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Zuri nodded grimly. "He told them all you died. Your relatives believed him. He poisoned them with lies before leaving you, told them you refused treatment, that you became unstable. So when he announced your death, they didn't question it." Amara's tears spilled freely. "He erased me. Then we'll write you again," Zuri said firmly. In the weeks that followed, Zuri orchestrated the impossible. Using her contacts, she arranged for Amara's discharge under a new name, Mara Imani. With borrowed papers, forged signatures, and the help of a sympathetic doctor, Amara was quietly released. Zuri packed a second-hand van with baby clothes formula and blankets. They drove 3 hours to Kijani, a rural town tucked behind rolling hills and dusty roads. There, in a small rented home with peeling paint and a dripping faucet, Amara began again. She wore her new name like armor. To the neighbors, she was simply a quiet single mother recovering from illness. They didn't ask questions. They saw her exhaustion, her tender love for the babies, and welcomed her with cautious warmth. Nights were hardest. The babies woke in rotations, sometimes 2 at once, leaving Amara shivering with fatigue. But she forced herself upright each time, whispering lullabies through cracked lips. The chemo had left her bones aching, her hair gone, her reflection hollow-eyed, yet she would not yield. "Sleep, little lions," she whispered into the dark. "Your mother is still here, still fighting." Meanwhile, Darius's world blossomed. Months after the funeral, gossip pages announced his engagement to Selena Hart, a wealthy socialite known for her beauty and her family's vineyard estate. The wedding was a spectacle: chandeliers, glittering tables overflowing with wine, Selena, radiant in a gown worth more than Amara's life savings. Beside her, Darius smiled, as if tragedy had softened him into something noble. The caption beneath one society photo stung deepest: Darius Cato, widowed father of triplets, finds love again after heartbreak. Amara saw the article by chance, scrolling on an old phone Zuri had salvaged. Her fingers trembled as she traced the photo on the screen. "Widowed father," she muttered bitterly. "He turned me into a corpse and himself into a saint." Zuri leaned over her shoulder. "He's building a kingdom of lies, but kingdoms like that always fall." Still, the pain gnawed at Amara. Every night after rocking her children to sleep, she wrote letters in a notebook, letters to her children about the father they once had, about the betrayal that cut her to pieces, about the promise that one day truth would rise. Weeks melted into months. Amara's strength slowly returned. She found small ways to provide washing laundry for neighbors, mending clothes, babysitting. The money was little, but it bought rice, soap, and sometimes medicine when Zuri couldn't bring supplies. Her children grew stronger. Their giggles filled the tiny house, their little feet learning to stumble across the cracked floors. Their innocence reminded her that not all had been stolen. Love still bloomed in the ruins, but inside Amara fire smoldered. One evening, Zuri brought her an envelope. "I couldn't hold this back," she said softly, placing it in Amara's hands. Inside were copies of legal documents, a life insurance claim Darius had filed listing Amara as deceased, bank transfers draining her inheritance into a shell company, forged paperwork bearing his signature. Amara's jaw clenched. "He killed me on paper to steal everything." Zuri's eyes hardened. He wanted a clean slate, no wife, no children, just money and freedom. But what he forgot is that the dead sometimes walk again. Amara held the papers to her chest, her voice steady now. "He buried me alive. One day I'll make him hear my voice." The children stirred in their cribs. She rose and kissed each of their foreheads, whispering promises they couldn't yet understand. "Your father left us, but I will never leave you. And when the time is right, I'll show the world who he really is." Outside the village, crickets sang. Somewhere far away, Darius toasted his new life with champagne. But under the quiet roof of that crumbling home, a mother's vow was written in fire, and fire once lit waits patiently for the moment to consume. The little house in Kijani became both a sanctuary and a battlefield. Sanctuary because no one there knew the name Amara Okoye. To her neighbors, she was simply Mara Imani, a frail but determined mother of 3 who had escaped the city to heal. A battlefield because every morning she woke with aching bones, nausea clawing at her throat, and 3 restless infants crying for food and comfort. Zuri was her anchor. She visited whenever shifts at the hospital allowed, often carrying bags of rice, tins of formula, or bundles of secondhand clothes. She would scoop up a baby in each arm and say, "See, your mama's stronger than she looks. Don't let her fool you." Amara smiled faintly, though inside she felt fragile as cracked glass. She could not shake the image of Darius in a tuxedo hand in hand with Selena, while the world pitied him as a grieving widower. Some nights the anger was so sharp, it felt like it could cut through her skin. But anger alone would not feed her children. So she learned to work quietly, humbly, and invisibly. Her first job came from an elderly neighbor who needed her laundry scrubbed in the stream. The pay was small coins wrapped in cloth, but it bought bread and lentils. Soon other women in the village noticed her diligence. They offered her chores, mending clothes, fetching water, watching their children while they worked the fields. Every coin went into a jar she kept beneath a loose floorboard. She called it the tomorrow jar. When her hands ached from scrubbing or her back throbbed from carrying heavy buckets, she would whisper, "Tomorrow will come. Stronger, brighter." At night, when the children finally slept, Amara sat by candlelight, writing in her notebook. She wrote not only letters to her children, but also careful notes about what Zuri uncovered. The forged death certificate, the drained accounts, the failed insurance claim. She cataloged every detail, every date. "Evidence," she muttered. "Someday these words will become my sword." Her reflection in the cracked mirror often startled her sunken cheeks, bald scalp eyes too large for her thin face. Yet there was a steel in those eyes now, a resilience that cancer and betrayal could not erase. Months passed. Her body healed slowly, her strength creeping back one day at a time. By the time the triplets could toddle across the room, Amara could finally lift them without collapsing. But life was still cruel. One rainy afternoon, she overheard market vendors gossiping. "Have you heard Darius Cato has launched a charity?" one woman said, arranging plantains on her stall. "He named it after his late wife, the Amara Trust for Women's Cancer." "Imagine a man so devoted to her memory," the other woman sighed dreamily. "Nkawa City calls him a hero. He raises money, gives speeches. They say he's an inspiration." Amara froze, clutching her woven basket so tightly it cut into her palms. He had not only buried her, he had turned her suffering into his brand. Her name was now his currency, her cancer, his ladder to glory. That night she collapsed onto the floor of her tiny kitchen, shaking. Zuri found her there during her next visit, eyes swollen from crying. "He's everywhere," Amara whispered. "On billboards and newspapers, smiling like he's the savior of women. And he uses my name. He stole even that from me." Zuri knelt beside her, voice sharp with conviction. "Then we take it back. But not yet. You need time. You need strength. And when you return, you'll return as a storm." Amara nodded slowly, pressing her palm to the cool floorboards. "A storm waits for the right season. I will wait." Years slipped quietly through the cracks of that small home. The children grew strong, 3 pairs of curious eyes, 3 bursts of laughter racing across the fields. Amara became known in Kijani as a hardworking mother with a gentle smile. She began crafting small beaded bracelets, which she sold at the market alongside her neighbor's vegetables. The bracelets caught attention. Soon she opened a modest stall, then a tiny shop called Second Dawn. But the shop was more than a business. It was a refuge. Amara invited other struggling women, widows, single mothers, survivors of abuse to sell their crafts there too. She told them, "We are not broken. We are beginning again." Part of every sale went into a small fund to help women battling illness. It was her quiet rebellion, her way of turning pain into purpose. One evening, as the children slept in their corner beds, Zuri arrived with a heavy envelope. She placed it on the wooden table. "You need to see this," she said gravely. Amara opened it and found more documents, bank statements, transfers to shell companies, signatures forged with her name. Her hands trembled. "He killed me on paper, to rob me blind." Zuri nodded. "And now he parades around the city as a saint. But listen, there are cracks. A journalist I trust, Tunde Cole, has been following whispers about Darius. He thinks something's rotten behind the charity. If you're ready, I can arrange a meeting." Amara's jaw tightened. She looked at her children, then back at the papers. "I'm ready to plant the first seed, but no one can know my face. Not yet." The following week, Tunde arrived at her little shop after hours. He was skeptical at first, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose as he studied her. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You're telling me Darius Cato, the face of cancer advocacy in Nkawa, faked your death and stole your inheritance?" Amara opened her notebook and slid it across the table. Inside were years of details, signatures, transfers, letters, even clippings of his public speeches. "I'm not telling you," she said evenly. "I'm showing you. I am Amara Okoye alive. And I don't want you to publish yet. I want you to wait until the world is watching." Tunde studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Then we build the story quietly. And when the stage is set, we strike." That night, as she locked up the shop, Amara whispered into the wind, "You buried me, Darius. But graves cannot hold the living." Far away in a glittering condo, Darius poured Selena another glass of wine. He smiled as cameras flashed from a magazine interview praising him as a humanitarian. He had no idea that the storm he thought he buried was already gathering patient and fierce just beyond the hills. The evening sky over Nkawa City glowed with lights, while the dusty roads of Kijani remained quiet and dim. Inside the small shop, Second Dawn, Amara sat at her worn wooden table, staring at the flickering candle as her triplets slept peacefully in the corner. The past haunted her like a phantom. She had been erased from her own life, yet here she was, alive, breathing, waiting. Meanwhile, across the city, Darius perfected his performance as the grieving husband turned hero. The funeral he orchestrated months earlier had been a grand play. Neighbors whispered how strong he was, standing stoically before the casket, bowing his head as though in endless grief. People had seen his crocodile. Tears had heard his trembling words. She fought bravely, but heaven called her home. No one knew the truth, that the woman they mourned was still alive, clutching 3 infants to her chest, her pulse weak, but her spirit unbroken. Darius spun lies with the ease of a seasoned storyteller. He told Amara's relatives she had lost the will to live, that she refused treatment. He had spent months poisoning their minds, whispering that she was unstable, impossible to live with, bitter from sickness. So when he declared her death, they didn't question. They grieved him, comforted him, praised his strength. And soon after, he brought Selena Hart into his spotlight. Selena was radiant, her father's fortune wrapped around her like silk. When their engagement was announced, the society pages devoured every photo. Darius, dressed in a tailored tuxedo, his hand resting gently on her waist, looked every bit the charming widower who had found love again after heartbreak. Selena wore a glittering gown, her smile dazzling beneath chandeliers. The caption burned Amara's eyes when Zuri showed her the article, "Darius Cato, widowed father of triplets, finds love again at last." She had nearly torn the page in half. "They call him a hero," she hissed, "a father who endured tragedy. Meanwhile, I'm here patching clothes to buy soap." Zuri's eyes hardened. The higher he climbs, the harder he'll fall. "Trust me, Amara, God is patient." The wedding itself was an extravagance whispered about for months. Selena's family vineyard glittered with fairy lights strung between the vines. Crystal chandeliers hung from temporary frames. Tables laden with imported wine and golden cutlery. Politicians, businessmen, and celebrities flocked to the event. And there stood Darius, toasting to new beginnings, while his 3 children, alive and needing him, were miles away in a crumbling shack. For Amara, the news came like a knife, twisted deeper. She sat on the floor of her little home that night, her children clinging to her skirt, tears burning down her cheeks. "Your father," she whispered to them, "though they were too young to understand, chose glitter and lies over you. But I, your mother, I will never choose anything over you." Her voice shook, but her vow was steel. Life in Kijani pressed forward. Amara's shop slowly gained recognition. Women came not just to buy, but to share their stories. Stories of husbands who had abandoned them, of sickness endured in silence, of survival, stitched into every bracelet or carved spoon. The shop became a circle of resilience, each item sold carrying whispers of healing. But while Amara's life rebuilt piece by fragile piece, Darius's empire grew rapidly. He launched his charity, the Amara Trust for Women's Cancer. Using her name like a sacred banner, he lured donors, politicians, and sponsors. His speeches dripped with devotion. "In memory of my late wife, whose courage inspires me daily." Crowds applauded women, wiped their eyes, and donors emptied their pockets. Every time Amara glimpsed his face on a billboard, her stomach twisted. He had stolen her story, her name, her pain, and polished it into gold. Still, Zuri cautioned patience. "If you reveal yourself now, he'll twist it. He has money, connections, the sympathy of an entire city. He'll paint you as mad, unfit. He could even take your children." Amara knew she was right. She had no power yet. She had only survival. So she waited. She healed. She grew. But one evening, as she rocked her children to sleep, Zuri rushed into the house with urgent eyes. She set down a manila folder on the table. "You need to see this," she whispered. Inside were new papers, a forged death certificate signed and stamped, claiming Amara Okoye had passed away. The signature wasn't hers, it was Darius's handiwork. There were also transfer records showing her mother's inheritance funneled into a shell company, then into Darius's accounts. Amara's breath hitched. "He killed me on paper to steal from me." Zuri's lips tightened. "And the world believes him a saint, but not forever." That night, Amara walked outside into the moonlit yard, staring up at the stars. Her heart pounded with fury, but also clarity. "He thinks I'm gone," she whispered into the dark. "Let him believe that. Let him climb higher, smile brighter, bask longer. Because when I return, I won't just take back my name. I'll take back every lie he built on my grave." In Inkawa City, Darius held Selena's hand as photographers swarmed. He smiled, his heart swollen with victory, convinced the past was buried. But in a quiet corner of Kijani, a storm was gathering. And storms, when they come, do not whisper, they roar. The nights in Kijani were long, but they taught Amara something she had almost forgotten: endurance. The sound of crickets outside her cracked window blended with the steady rhythm of her children's breathing. She often sat awake, watching their tiny chests rise and fall, whispering to herself that survival was its own form of victory. Every morning she woke before dawn to fetch water from the well, her frail body wrapped in a faded shawl. Other women in the village would nod to her kindly, some pitying the bald patches left by her treatments, others admiring her grit. They knew her only as Mara Imani, a widow who had fled the city for peace. Nobody asked for details. In Kijani, people understood that silence was sometimes a shield. As the months rolled by, her strength returned, though never fully. Some days she would collapse into a chair after only an hour's work, trembling with exhaustion. But instead of despair, she began to feel a new kind of determination. Each small triumph, the children learning to walk her bracelets, selling at the market, her ability to climb the hill without gasping for breath, became proof that she was not finished. Zuri's visits were her lifeline. Whenever her friend appeared at the door carrying baskets of groceries or new medicine, Amara felt less invisible. One evening after putting the triplets to bed, she confessed, "There are nights I dream of confronting him. I dream of walking into one of his charity galas and watching his face collapse when he sees me alive." Zuri smiled sadly. "That day will come, Amara, but not yet. Right now your power is in patience. You're building yourself again brick by brick. One day you'll be the storm that tears his house apart." Amara nodded, clutching her friend's hand. "Then I'll wait, but I won't forget." The charity grew faster than wildfire. Darius appeared in glossy magazines, hailed as the widowed father of triplets who turned tragedy into advocacy. He hosted galas in marble halls, shaking hands with governors and CEOs. Photos of him kissing Selena's hand of him on stages with microphones flooded the press. The cruelest part was the name, the Amara Trust for Women's Cancer. Every time Amara saw it on a flyer or a newspaper, it felt like a blade twisting deeper. It wasn't just her name, it was her pain, her fight, her illness that he had weaponized for wealth and applause. At night, Amara sometimes scribbled in her journal, "He thinks he owns my story. He thinks he buried me. But survival is the sharpest revenge. And when I return, I will return with truth." The triplets grew into lively toddlers, their laughter filling the little house with light. They didn't know the details of their father's betrayal. All they knew was their mother's arms, her gentle songs, and the stories she told at night about lions who refused to bow, about rivers that carved mountains. One evening, after a long day at her shop, Amara whispered a story to them. Once there was a tree struck by lightning. Everyone thought it had died. But deep under the ground, its roots still lived. And when the rains returned, the tree rose again, stronger, taller, and greener than ever. The children clapped their tiny hands, cheering for the tree. Amara kissed their foreheads and thought, "That tree is me." Her shop's second dawn blossomed into something more than a business. She began teaching other women how to bead jewelry, carve spoons, and weave baskets. Survivors of illness, widows, abandoned mothers, they gathered there not only to earn, but to heal. Customers came from nearby villages attracted by the crafts, but returning for the sense of community. Amara became known quietly as a leader, though she never sought it. She told the women, "We are not victims, we are warriors who survived the fire, and everything we sell here carries that strength." But even as her days filled with meaning, the shadow of Darius lingered. One afternoon, while buying supplies in town, she overheard a radio announcer praising him. "Darius Cato has been nominated for the Humanitarian of the Year award, honoring his tireless work for women battling cancer." Amara froze her basket slipping from her hands. Anger surged like a flood. She hurried home, stormed into her shop, and slammed the door shut. The children, startled, watched as she paced back and forth. "He took everything," she hissed. "My money, my name, my story, even my death. And now he wears my suffering like a crown." Zuri, who had stopped by with medicine, listened quietly. After a moment, she said, "Then let him wear it. The heavier the crown, the easier it is to topple. Every lie he tells makes the fall harder when truth arrives." Amara stopped pacing, breathing hard. Slowly, her fury calmed into focus. "You're right. He believes he erased me, but I'll let him keep believing. And when he stands tallest, when the world claps the loudest, that's when I'll return." She turned to the window, the sunset painting her face in hues of fire. Her reflection in the glass no longer looked fragile, it looked unbreakable. Months passed. Amara's strength grew. She even began writing speeches in her notebook, imaginary words she dreamed of one day, saying aloud. She practiced them while walking through the fields, whispering them under her breath. Words like "You buried me" on paper, but paper burns. Flesh survives, spirit survives. Her children thrived. They chased each other around the shop, their laughter a constant reminder of why she endured. They didn't need a father who abandoned them. They had a mother who refused to die. But life had one more cruel twist. One Saturday, Zuri arrived at the shop with a bundle of newspapers. She spread them on the table, her face grim. "Look," she said. Amara's eyes fell on the front page, Darius Cato, to host gala in memory of his late wife. Event expected to raise millions for cancer research. And beneath the headline was a photo of Darius smiling with Selena holding a golden invitation. Amara's hands shook as she traced the words, "In memory of Amara Okoye." The fury that rose in her chest was no longer fragile anger. It was fire, steady and controlled. She looked at Zuri, eyes blazing. "He plans to honor me in death, then let him. Because at that gala the dead will walk." Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Zuri stared at her, then slowly nodded. "Then it begins." That night, as the children slept, Amara stood before the mirror, adjusting her scarf. She no longer saw the broken woman Darius abandoned. She saw a survivor, a mother, and soon a reckoning. "He buried me once," she whispered, "but this time I will be the one to bury him." And with that, the storm waiting in silence sharpened into purpose. The rains had come to Kijani, drumming against the corrugated roof of Amara's little home, but inside Second Dawn there was warmth. Women bent over baskets, their hands busy, weaving, sewing, and stringing beads, while the smell of roasted maize drifted in from the neighbor's fire. The shop had become a gathering place, part market, part refuge, part sisterhood. Amara sat at the back table, braiding colored beads into a necklace, her children tumbling in the corner with laughter that filled the room. She wore her scarf loosely, now new hair sprouting soft curls around her face. Her body was still scarred by the treatments, but she carried herself straighter. For the first time in years, she felt alive, not just in survival, but in purpose. Yet the storm outside was nothing compared to the one brewing in Nkawa City. News reached Kijani that Darius's charity had opened new offices downtown. Photos of him shaking hands with governors appeared on every magazine. One article called him the city's most compassionate son, a widower who turned grief into action. Amara laughed bitterly when she read it. Compassionate. He abandoned his wife on a hospital floor. He left his babies crying in their cribs. She slammed the paper down. Zuri, seated across from her, placed a calming hand on her arm. "Patience, sister. The mask always cracks. But we must make sure when it does, the whole world sees." That night, after tucking her children into bed, Amara unlocked the floorboard where she kept her tomorrow jar. She emptied the coins onto the table and counted them slowly. Not much, but enough to start thinking bigger. She opened her notebook, not the one filled with letters for her children, but the one labeled simply justice. There she outlined a plan. Not reckless confrontation, not a sudden outburst, but a steady building of power. Step by step, brick by brick. The next morning she visited the local cooperative office. A young lawyer named Ayo Danjuma offered free legal consultations once a week for low-income families. Amara listened quietly as others told their troubles, land disputes, debts, custody battles. When her turn came, she leaned forward and asked softly, "What would happen if someone forged a death certificate?" Ayo raised his brows. "That's a serious crime. Fraud, identity theft. If proven, it can lead to years in prison. And if they used it to steal inheritance, to drain accounts," she pressed. He shook his head. "That's grand larceny. Embezzlement. With evidence, the courts would tear them apart." Amara sat back, heart pounding. Evidence, she had plenty. But she wasn't ready yet. She couldn't risk exposing herself until she was strong enough to protect her children. Still, she thanked him, tucking away the information like another weapon for the day of battle. Weeks passed. With Zuri's help, Amara built Second Dawn into more than a stall. They cleared out the back room, painted the walls bright white, and installed shelves to display crafts. She partnered with women from nearby shelters, offering them a cut of the profits. Soon, word spread Second Dawn was not only a shop, but a movement. Customers from Nkawa City began to make the journey to Kijani to buy the unique goods. Some even placed large orders for export. The income grew. Amara was finally able to afford proper medicine, new shoes for her children, even a second-hand sewing machine. One evening, as she closed the shop, Zuri arrived with a small flash drive. She slipped it into Amara's hand. "What's this?" Amara asked. "More evidence," Zuri replied. "A friend in the hospital system pulled strings. Inside, you'll find copies of the forged certificate hospital records and proof of funds transferred into Darius's accounts. It's enough to bury him when the time is right." Amara clenched the flash drive tightly. Not yet, she whispered. Let him climb higher. Let him build his empire on my grave. The higher he rises, the harder the fall. Meanwhile, in Kawa City, Selena Hart began noticing cracks in her golden life. At first, being married to Darius was everything she dreamed. Lavish dinners, weekend getaways, luxury dripping from every corner of their penthouse. But slowly, shadows crept in. Darius grew controlling. He insisted she quit her part-time work at her father's vineyard. He monitored her phone calls, grew cold whenever she asked about his past. Why don't we ever talk about Amara? She asked one night. She's dead, he snapped, pouring himself another glass of whiskey. What is there to talk about? But Selena's instincts gnawed at her. She had searched through old photographs once and noticed strange things. No pictures of Amara pregnant, no hospital records, no birth announcements. The children's photos seemed staged without dates or context. Suspicion grew heavier when she accidentally glimpsed a transfer record on his open laptop, a large sum wired to an offshore account. The date matched the weeks after Amara's supposed death. Her hands shook as she whispered to herself, "Oh my God, what did you do, Darius?" Back in Kijani, Amara's world was changing too. Her children were nearly 5, racing around the shop, their giggles echoing through the aisles. Customers adored them, often calling them the little lions of Second Dawn. But Amara's focus remained sharp. Every evening she studied the documents Zuri gathered, building a timeline of Darius's fraud. She imagined presenting them in court, imagined standing before cameras and saying, "You thought I was gone, but I survived, and now the world will know the truth." One Saturday, Zuri arrived at the shop with a newspaper. She laid it on the counter. The headline screamed, "Darius Cato receives Humanitarian of the Year award." The photo showed Darius on stage, Selena by his side, smiling at a glittering crowd. Behind them hung a massive banner, the Amara Trust Gala for Women's Strength. Amara's chest tightened. He was still using her name, her pain, her memory, and the world cheered him for it. She stood trembling, fury shaking through her bones. "Enough," she said finally, her voice low and firm. Zuri's eyes widened. "What are you thinking?" Amara turned her reflection hard in the shop window. "I've waited long enough. It's time to begin. But not with fists, not with screams, with proof, with power. We will not just topple him, we will shatter everything he built." Her children ran to her, wrapping their small arms around her legs. She bent down, hugging them tightly, whispering into their hair. "You don't know yet," she murmured, "but your mother is about to rise. And when I rise, I will never fall again." The storm had been patient, but patience was ending. Amara tucked the flash drive into her pocket, her heart pounding like the drums of her ancestors. She was no longer just the woman abandoned, no longer just the patient fighting for her life. She was the storm, and the season of silence was over. The morning sun in Kijani painted the fields in shades of gold, but inside Second Dawn, Amara's heart was restless. She had carried her silence for years, allowed her wounds to harden into armor. Now, with every new headline praising Darius, she felt the time drawing closer. Her shop had become a hive of whispers and hope. Women from nearby villages came not only to trade crafts, but to tell their stories. Some had been left by husbands, some had faced illness alone, and others carried scars no one else could see. Amara listened to them, encouraged them, and reminded herself that strength came not from erasing pain, but from facing it. Yet even surrounded by resilience, she couldn't ignore the shadow. Darius was everywhere. His name glowed on billboards, his smile beamed from newspapers, his charity swallowed donations like a river in flood. He had become a symbol of goodness built entirely on lies. One evening after the children had drifted into sleep, Zuri entered the shop with her jaw set tight. She placed a folder on the counter. "What is this?" Amara asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Proof," Zuri replied. "More than enough to destroy him." Inside the folder were copies of transfers to shell companies' signed forms for a forged death certificate and records of Darius attempting to cash in on Amara's life insurance. Amara's breath grew shallow as she scanned the papers. Each line was another dagger in her chest, yet also another weapon for her hand. "He really did it," she whispered. "He erased me on paper." Zuri leaned forward. "I also reached out to someone who can help Tunde Cole. He's an investigative journalist, one of the few who still cares about truth. If anyone can bring this into the light, it's him." Amara hesitated. Meeting an outsider felt dangerous. But then she thought of her children, of their future. "Set it up," she said finally. 2 nights later, Tunde arrived at Second Dawn after closing hours. He wore a leather jacket and glasses that reflected the dim light of the shop. His eyes studied Amara skeptically. "Let me get this straight," he began, sipping the bitter coffee Zuri offered. "You're saying Darius Cato, the man every billboard in Nukawa praises, faked your death, stole your inheritance, and is laundering money through his charity?" Amara looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not saying it. I'm proving it." She slid the folder across the table. Tunde flipped through the documents, his expression shifting from doubt to shock. "I've heard rumors about Cato, but no one ever had this kind of evidence." Amara's voice was calm but sharp. "I don't want you to publish anything yet. He has power connections. If we expose him now, he'll twist the story. I want him destroyed when the world is watching, when it will matter most." Tunde leaned back, studying her. "You're playing a long game." Amara's lips curled into a thin smile. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall. While Amara built her case in silence, Darius's home life with Selena began to fracture. At first, Selena adored her husband's charm, his promises, his wealth. But cracks spread quickly. She noticed how secretive he became with his phone, how defensive when she asked questions. One night, curiosity drove her to open his laptop after he fell asleep. There she found fragments of truth, unverified death certificates, hidden transfers, offshore accounts. Her blood ran cold. He lied to me. He lied to everyone. Fear clawed at her chest, especially after she discovered her own pregnancy. The thought of raising a child under Darius's shadow filled her with dread. When she confronted him gently, he brushed her off. "Don't worry about it. That's business, not your concern." But when she pressed harder, his eyes turned sharp. "Selena, if you start digging into things that don't concern you, you'll regret it. Do you understand?" That night she lay awake, hand on her stomach, whispering, "What kind of man have I married?" Back in Kijani, Amara's strength grew. The shop was thriving, the children healthy. Yet she knew this was only the calm before the storm. She began drafting letters not just to lawyers and officials, but to her children, letters explaining the truth of who their father was and why she had to fight. One afternoon, as she was closing the shop, Zuri entered with a grim look. "I spoke with Tunde again," she said. "He's ready to dig deeper. But he needs more than papers. He needs someone close to Darius, someone inside his world." Amara's heart skipped. "Selena." Zuri nodded slowly. "Exactly. She's the only one who could provide the final blow." For weeks they waited. Then one rainy night, Amara received a message slipped under her shop door. It was written in neat, nervous handwriting. "We need to talk. I know what he did. S." Amara's hands shook as she read it. Selena had reached out. The meeting took place in the back room of the shop. Selena wore a hooded cloak, her face pale, her hands trembling. "I shouldn't be here," Selena whispered. "If he finds out..." Amara offered her tea. "You're safe here. Why did you come?" Tears glistened in Selena's eyes. "Because I know he lied. I found the certificate, the transfers, and I can't live with it. He told me you were gone, that he did everything to save you, but you're alive. And I believe you." She pulled a folded letter from her bag. This is his handwriting. A letter he wrote years ago. He called you a burden, said he was leaving you and the children. I kept it because something about it haunted me. Maybe it's what you need." Amara unfolded the letter, her hands trembling. The words stabbed like knives. "I can't waste my life on you and those brats. Don't look for me." She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. Proof. The final piece. Selena looked at her desperately. "I don't want my child to grow up under his lies. Please end this." Amara reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I will, but we must do it carefully. Together." Later that night, as Selena slipped away into the rain, Zuri turned to Amara. "Now you have everything. Documents, testimony, and even his own words. What will you do next?" Amara gazed at her sleeping children, their innocent faces glowing in the dim light. Then she looked at the folder of evidence heavy with years of betrayal. "We build the fire slowly," she said. "And when the gala comes, when every camera is on him, we strike. He will not only lose his freedom, he will lose his mask." Zuri nodded, eyes fierce. "Then let's prepare. The season of silence is almost over." Amara closed her notebook, her heart steady. She was no longer the woman who had collapsed on a hospital floor. She was no longer the ghost he tried to bury. She was the storm, and the storm was ready to roar. The days leading up to the gala stretched like taut ropes, vibrating with tension that Amara could almost hear in her sleep. Each sunrise in Kijani seemed quieter, as though the village itself sensed the storm drawing near. In her shop, Second Dawn, she worked as if everything were ordinary, selling bracelets, weaving baskets, helping the children with their letters, but inside her mind burned with calculation. Selina's visit had changed everything. The young woman's pale face and trembling voice lingered in Amara's memory. The letter Selina delivered with Darius's handwriting, cold and merciless, was a weapon sharper than any blade. Proof not only of abandonment but of intent. Proof that would destroy his carefully woven mask. One night as the children slept, Amara sat by candlelight with Zuri. The folder of evidence lay open between them, papers spread like battle plans. "Do you see it?" Amara whispered, her finger, tapping the forged death certificate. Then the transfer records, then the handwritten letter. Every lie is here, every theft, every betrayal. When the world sees this, Darius will have nowhere to run. Zuri nodded, though, her brow furrowed. "But you must be careful. He is powerful. Men like him don't fall without a fight. If he senses even a shadow of your return, he will strike first." Amara met her friend's gaze, her own steady. "Then we give him no warning. We wait until every camera is watching, until he believes he has won." Meanwhile, in Kawa City, Selina lived in silent dread. The penthouse apartment glistened with glass and marble, but to her, it felt like a cage. Darius had grown more controlling, his temper sharper. He monitored her movements, demanded she stay away from certain friends, and dismissed her questions with cold authority. The pregnancy changed everything. She had taken the test alone, her hands shaking the little blue lines, confirming the secret she already feared. When she told Darius, he barely looked up from his phone. "That's great," he muttered, scrolling through messages. "Just keep it quiet for now. The PR team has other plans this quarter." Selina's chest tightened. She had expected tears of joy, or at least a smile. Instead, she saw calculation, the same coldness Amara had once faced. That night, she confronted him again. "You forged Amara's death certificate. I know you stole her money. I know she might not be dead." For the first time, Darius's mask slipped. He set down his glass slowly, his jaw tightening. "Selina," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "If you ever say those things out loud again, if you even hint at them, your life will explode. Do you understand?" Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "I'm carrying your child." "I know," he replied coldly, "which is exactly why you will sit still, smile for the cameras, and forget all of this." Tears welled in her eyes, but inside something hardened. That same night, she wrote another note. One she planned to deliver to Amara. If she could escape his gaze again, "I will not let my child grow under his lies. I will help you end this." In Kijani, Amara's children were growing fast. Nearly 6 years old now, they filled the little home with noise and questions. "Why don't we have a father like the other children?" one of them asked innocently one evening. Amara's chest clenched. She gathered them close, kissing their foreheads. "You have something better," she said softly. "You have a mother who will never leave you. And one day when you are older, you will understand everything." The innocence in their eyes steeled her resolve. She would not let them live in the shadow of a lie. That week, Zuri returned with news. "Tunde is ready. He has been digging into Darius's accounts, interviewing staff from the charity. The cracks are already forming. A sponsor pulled out of his next project. A bank froze one of his loans." Amara allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Good, but not yet. We need the final blow. The gala will be it." She began preparing quietly. Zuri took her into the city for fittings where Amara tried on dresses that made her reflection almost unrecognizable. For years, she had hidden in scarves and worn fabrics, but in the mirror now, she saw a woman, reborn hair curled to her shoulders, cheeks, fuller eyes alive with fire. "I don't see a victim," Zuri said, softly adjusting the dress. "I see a warrior." Amara touched her reflection with trembling fingers. "I see someone who refused to die." The tension in Nkawa City built like thunderclouds. Invitations to the Amara Trust Gala arrived in golden envelopes, promising an evening of elegance and inspiration. "In honor of the memory of Amara Okoye," the script declared. Politicians, celebrities, philanthropists all marked their calendars. Darius was elated. He paced their penthouse rehearsing speeches, smiling at himself in the mirror. "This is it, Selina," he said one night, his teeth gleaming in the glass. "The night the world will finally see me as more than a man, they'll see me as a legend." Selina forced a smile, hiding the nausea curling in her gut. In her heart, she thought, "The night the world sees your ruin." Back in Kijani, Amara stood in her shop after closing the golden invitation, now lying on her table. It had been delivered to Mara Amani as part of a citywide business outreach. She had stared at the embossed letters for hours, before finally laughing bitterly. "He's planning to honor me again," she said aloud. To raise money with my name, my memory while I sit here breathing. Zuri folded her arms. Then this is God's timing. The dead will walk into his gala. Amara's hand trembled slightly as she traced the edges of the invitation. Yes, she whispered. Let him build his stage. I'll make it his scaffold. That night, she packed carefully documents in a leather folder, the letter from Darius folded neatly inside the flash drive secured in her bag. She kissed her children as they slept, whispering into their hair. When I come back, the world will know the truth, and you will never have to carry his shadow. The crickets sang outside. Somewhere beyond the hills, chandeliers were being polished. Banners hung champagne chilled. The storm was on its way to the city. And this time, the storm had a name. The days ticked down toward the gala, each one taut with anticipation. In Inkawa City, the streets near the Grand Hotel buzzed with preparations. Banners bearing Amara's name, the Amara Trust Gala for Women's Strength, fluttered from lampposts. Billboards showed Darius's practiced smile beside Selena's glowing face, their hands clasped like royalty. Meanwhile, in the quiet of Kijani, Amara was sharpening her final weapons. The folder of evidence lay open on her desk papers, neatly arranged the forged death certificate transfer records, stolen inheritance, the failed insurance claim, and finally the letter in Darius's own hand, abandoning his family. Zuri sat across from her, lips pressed tight. This is enough to ruin him 100 times over, Zuri said. But we need the right moment. Amara nodded. The gala will be his throne. We will make it his downfall. Tunde Cole, the journalist, visited them one evening. He carried his laptop and a voice recorder, eyes sharp with determination. I've traced his charity funds, he explained, pulling up spreadsheets on the screen. A large percentage funnels into shell companies. He's laundering donations, millions. Once this goes public, it will explode. Amara listened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But not before the gala. Promise me, Tunde. I want the world to see his mask shatter in the same moment. Tunde leaned back, studying her. You've waited this long. You really want to stand in the fire yourself. Her eyes burned with quiet fury. He buried me alive. He used my name to build his kingdom. I won't hide in shadows when the truth comes. I will be there in flesh and blood. Tunde exhaled slowly, then nodded. Then we'll time it perfectly. I'll tip the police and the press, but the spark must come from you. Meanwhile, Selena played her part carefully in the city. She smiled beside Darius at interviews, touched his arm at luncheons, and posed for photos. But behind her eyes was a storm. Her pregnancy was advancing, but she concealed it under loose gowns. At night, when Darius was asleep, she scoured his office drawers, copying more documents onto small flash drives. Each one she hid inside her vanity drawer beneath old scarves. One evening, she stood before the mirror, hands resting on her stomach. I won't let you grow up in lies, she whispered to the unborn child. Your father's empire will fall before you take your first breath. The next morning, she secretly sent one of the flash drives to Tunde's office. Inside were emails, bank transfers, and notes Darius had written about clean slates and closing accounts. It was the missing piece confirming everything. As the gala drew near, the city buzzed with excitement. Invitations were golden and embossed. The guest list glittered with names of senators, philanthropists, and even foreign dignitaries. The hotel ballroom was being transformed into a palace of light chandeliers, velvet drapes, orchestras rehearsing soft music. Darius relished every moment. He rehearsed his speech nightly, pacing in front of a mirror. Tonight he murmured to his reflection, I am not just a man. I am a movement. They will never forget me. Selena watched from the sofa, her hands folded tightly to keep them from trembling. Inside she thought, they will never forget you, yes, but not for the reasons you believe. Back in Kijani, Amara prepared her own entrance. Angela, no, in this retelling it was still. Zuri helped her pack a sleek black dress shoes borrowed from a neighbor and a simple pearl necklace. You look like someone who's already won, Zuri, whispered, fastening the clasp. Amara met her eyes in the mirror. I'm not walking into his gala as a ghost. I'm walking in as the woman he couldn't kill. She kissed her children goodbye, leaving them with a trusted neighbor. Their little hands clung to her skirt. Where are you going, Mama? One asked. To make sure the world knows the truth, she replied softly. I'll be back before morning. Be good, my lions. Their innocent eyes gave her strength. On the night of the gala, the ballroom glittered like a scene from a dream. Guests in gowns and tuxedos mingled, sipping champagne as photographers' flashes painted the room in bursts of white. At the center of it all, Darius and Selena stood as hosts. Tonight, Darius announced as he took the stage, we gather in memory of my late wife, Amara Okoye, whose courage still inspires us. His voice quavered with rehearsed emotion. Her strength reminds us that love outlives death and that hope outshines despair. The crowd applauded, some dabbing at their eyes. Darius soaked it in his chest, swelling with pride. Then the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Gasps rippled through the crowd as heads turned. A woman in a sleek black dress walked in, her hair curling softly around her shoulders, her eyes sharp as fire. Amara. Alive. Darius froze on stage, his lips parting the microphone, slipping slightly in his hand. Cameras swung, flashes, exploded voices rose in stunned whispers. Selena dropped her champagne glass. The sharp clink echoed in the silence. Amara walked slowly, steadily, her heels tapping against the marble floor. She stopped at the foot of the stage, locking eyes with Darius. "You weren't expecting me," she said softly. The microphone caught her words, sending them across the stunned room. Darius stammered, "Amara, this isn't what it looks like." Selena's face twisted with disgust. She reached for the engagement ring on her finger, yanked it off and let it fall at his feet with a sharp metallic clink. Then she turned and walked off the stage, her head high. No one stopped Amara as she ascended the steps. She turned to the crowd, pulled a folder from her purse, and held it aloft. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady. "My name is Amara Okoye. Not the memory you think you honor tonight. Not the face behind this false charity. I am the woman he buried on paper, erased with lies, and left to die." Gasps, shouts, flashes. She handed the folder to a reporter in the front row. "Inside you will find proof that Darius Cato forged my death certificate, emptied my inheritance, and even tried to file my life insurance. He stole my name, my story, and my children's future." The ballroom erupted. Some cried out in disbelief, others shouted questions. Cameras zoomed in on Darius, whose face dripped with sweat. At that moment, Tunde Cole stepped forward with a police officer. His voice cut through the chaos. "Darius Cato, you are under arrest for fraud, identity theft, forgery, and embezzlement." The officer gripped Darius's arms and pulled him behind his back. "No," Darius shouted, thrashing. "She's setting me up. She's dead. I buried her." Amara stepped closer, her eyes never wavering. "You left me to die," she said softly into the microphone. "But I didn't. I lived. I raised the children you abandoned, and now the world knows the truth." Applause began slowly, then built into a roar. Guests rose to their feet, clapping not for a saint but for a survivor. As Darius was dragged away in handcuffs, Amara turned back to the crowd. Her voice, calm but powerful, filled the room. "I am not here for revenge. I am here to remind you that survival is louder than betrayal. And no matter how deep they bury you, truth always rises." The chandeliers above seemed to tremble with the thunder of applause. The storm had struck, and Darius Cato's empire of lies lay in ruins. The ballroom was still buzzing long after the police dragged Darius away in handcuffs. The glittering chandeliers swayed as if the very room itself had exhaled after years of suffocating under his lies. Reporters jostled forward, cameras flashing relentlessly. Some shouted questions at Amara. "Where have you been all these years? How did you survive? What happens to the trust now?" Amara stood tall in the center of it, all calm and steady. For a moment, she felt the weight of every year of silence pressing down, but she also felt the wings of freedom lifting her higher. She had not come to the gala to drown in noise, but to reclaim her name. Zuri moved quickly to her side, protective, as always. "It's time to go," she whispered. "You've made your point. Don't let them pull more from you than you want to give." Amara nodded, clutching the pearl necklace at her throat. She turned to the microphones one last time. "This is not the end of my story," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "It is the beginning of truth. For me, for my children, and for every woman silenced by betrayal. Remember this, lies build empires, but truth always tears them down." With that, she walked off the stage. The applause followed her like a tide. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. Police sirens wailed in the distance as Darius was driven away. Across the plaza, Selena stood under a lamppost, her red gown glowing like fire against the dark. She looked shaken, but when Amara approached, their eyes met not with rivalry, but with something close to solidarity. "I should thank you," Selena said quietly, her hands resting protectively on her stomach. "You saved me before it was too late. I was blind to what he really was." Amara studied her for a long moment. "He fooled us both. But you chose to step away. That takes courage." Selena's eyes welled. "He'll try to blame me. He'll try to destroy me too." Amara placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Then you must do what I did, survive and protect your child. The truth is on your side now." For the first time, Selena smiled faintly, though her lips trembled. I hope your children know how lucky they are to have you. Amara glanced at the police car vanishing into the night. I hope they know one day why I fought. In the weeks that followed, Inkawa City was consumed by scandal. Newspapers screamed headlines, humanitarian exposed as fraud. Darius Kato arrested for forgery and embezzlement. Editorials that once praised him now tore his reputation apart. Donors pulled their money, the trust collapsed, and investigations uncovered layers of corruption that left even his closest allies fleeing from the wreckage. Court hearings revealed the depth of his betrayal. Witnesses testified about the forged certificate, the stolen inheritance, the offshore accounts. Selena submitted documents she had kept hidden, further tightening the noose. Darius's pleas of innocence rang hollow against the mountain of evidence. For Amara, attending the hearings was both painful and liberating. She listened to lawyers recite the years of theft and deceit, each word reopening old wounds. But each day she walked out of the courthouse head high, knowing the world finally recognized the truth. She was not a ghost, not a memory, not a weak woman left behind. She was a survivor. The community that had once pitied Darius now turned their admiration toward her. Women came forward to tell her how her return gave them courage to leave abusive husbands, to fight for justice, to claim their own voices. Strangers wrote letters thanking her for proving that even when buried in lies, a woman could rise stronger than ever. But the sweetest victory was not in the newspapers or the courtrooms. It was in the quiet moments at home. Her children, now nearly 6, wrapped their arms around her each evening, their laughter filling the little house. They no longer asked about their father. Instead, they asked her to tell them stories. Stories of lions who roared louder than storms, of rivers that carved valleys through stone, of trees that rose again after lightning struck. And every time she finished, she whispered, "Do you know who those stories are about?" They would giggle and guess animals, heroes, or kings. And she would smile and say, "They are about us, about you and me, and how we will always rise." The night after Darius was sentenced, Amara stood outside Second Dawn with Zuri. The shop lights glowed warmly behind them, the crafts of dozens of women displayed proudly on the shelves. "He's gone for a long time," Zuri said, quietly sipping her tea. "But what now, Amara? What will you do with this freedom?" Amara looked at the stars above Kijani. "I will live, not in hiding, not in fear. I will raise my children in light, not shadows. And I will keep building this place for women like us, for those who think they have no voice. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence is where lies grow strongest, and I won't let silence win again." Zuri nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "You've turned pain into purpose. That's power." Amara smiled softly. "And power is nothing unless it's shared." Months later, the gala hall that once celebrated Darius was reopened under new management for a different purpose. This time it was Amara who stood on the stage. Her hair now thick and curly framed her face with strength. She wore a simple dress, her children sitting proudly in the front row. "Tonight," she said, her voice steady and warm, "we gather not for lies but for truth. Not for one man's ego but for women who survive storms. This fund, rebuilt with honesty, will help women battling illness and betrayal find hope again, because hope is what saved me and what will save others." The applause that followed was genuine, not forced by illusion. It was respect, not spectacle. Amara looked down at her children, their little hands clapping fiercely, their smiles radiant. For the first time in years, her heart was full without the shadow of bitterness. She had buried her past not in grief but in victory. And now her story belonged not to Darius, not to lies, but to herself and to every soul who needed to believe that survival was possible. The storm had passed. The dawn was hers. Life can strip us bare, betray us through the hands of those we trusted most, and bury us under lies so heavy we almost forget who we are. But Amara's story reminds us survival itself is a triumph. Betrayal may wound, but it cannot define. Lies may rise, but truth will always find its voice. And strength, true strength, is not the absence of pain, but the decision to keep standing in spite of it. Let Amara's journey be a mirror for your own life. No matter how dark the night, there is always a dawn waiting. Hold on for it, fight for it, and when it comes, embrace it boldly. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching, from what time it is there, and what part of Amara's resilience speaks to your own journey. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, because together we keep stories like this alive, stories that remind us all, no storm lasts forever.